So we have Indrani with us. Ma'am, you can just introduce and start.
Yes, please. Thank you, Sumana. I think a very interesting session of the day, with reimagining the organization for the new normal, insights from real life cases. Can you hear me? Am I on mute now? This is actually going to bring out the results of almost a 3-month survey organized by, between CII and Talentonic and led by Mr. Deepak Dhawan, who is the CEO and founder of Talentonic HR Solutions. The study was actually kind of championed by Mr. S.Y. Siddiqui, Chief Mentor of Maruti Suzuki India Limited, and a lot of inputs given by Mr. Udbhav Ganju, who is the head of HR Global Operations India, Emerging Asia and Access Markets from Beatrice. So a phenomenal combination of the Troika, and something new is going to come out of this. So we are expecting some very phenomenal presentation. I won't take more time and request Mr. Ganju to please take over the reins of this session and moderate it. Thank you, Mr. Ganju.
Thank you, Indrani, and welcome Mr. Dhawan and Mr. Siddiqui and Prince for unveiling this report on reimagining the organization for the normal. This study, as Indrani indicated, was done for the past 3-4 months by CIA in collaboration with Talentonics, led by Mr. Dhawan. And it was more than 50 hours of interviewing the industry leaders and the CHROs. They are taking their views, and this report has been put together very brilliantly by Mr. Dhawan and his team. And now I'll not take much of time to really go into the details of the report, which Mr. Dhawan will be unveiling now. So Deepak, please, over to you for taking us through this presentation and the research, what was carried by you and
Thanks a lot, Udbhav. Good to be here, and thanks so much for inviting me. So, very quickly, I just have a couple of points really to make before we kind of shoot off. This is the research core group that Indrani kind of spoke about, led by Mr. Siddiqui and Mr. Ganju and everybody else being part of the research group, which actually conceptualized the research project a few months ago, and then added value to it over a period of time in terms of what the insights were and how to take the insights kind of forward. So the 2 points I want to make is, one is, I'm going to try and keep this as a very short preview because, at the end of the day, what we are really expecting is if you can download the report, which is available. If you see on the right-hand side of every screen, there's a QR code, and you can use your smartphone and download the report, or later on in the days here, I'll be giving you a flat file which will have the links that you can use to download the report, right? So this is going to be basically a teaser, giving you the high points of what is contained in the report, and then leaving you to go through the insights over a period of time, right? So what we have done for this purpose is we have taken the big insights coming out of the report, and we have put them down as 11 simple points, right? So in the rest of the short presentation, I'm just going to touch on these 11 points that have been made, which are the 11 conclusions, findings, insights from this research report. And then, like I said, we'll come to the end, which is the more powerful one, point number 11, which is what is therefore the role of HR that is emerging. This was the point of the whole research project, that what are the changes that are kind of happening, how are people responding and reacting at this point in time, what's really happened in the first 3-4 months in terms of the pivot phase, when the lockdown suddenly came up, what happened after that, and how are people thinking of reimagining their organizations in a more permanent kind of a way, which is really work in progress as you kind of go forward. Out of all this, what's really emerging for HR? I think that's the big takeaway that we really want to present today, and which is a part of the report. So really going through the summary view, very strong value orientation of the Indian business, it emerged, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Not that that was surprising, but how it manifested itself and how it created, what should I say, how it created an employee commitment. There's lots of material in the report which will kind of talk about that. The second thing, sustainable people operations 1 over cost. You'll recall there were a number of conversations initially about, bear in mind the fact that a lot of the businesses were hit by revenue as well as cash issues. But despite that, and earlier there were discussions, how is this going to lead to job cuts? How is this going to lead to salary adjustments? And we have to tighten our belt, and we'll have to do various things to see if fixed costs can be actually adjusted. I think what the study found, and we'll talk a little bit of the highlights of that, is that sustainable people operations 1 over cost. And there are not many organizations that went out and did the stuff that initially was being talked about. But as a part of the strong value orientation of Indian business, the need to keep sustainable operations, this is what really happened. Point number 3, command and control gave way to empowerment in a big way. In firm after firm that we queried, in CEO after CEO that we spoke to, I think firms realized that at this point in time, with the kind of variety, the kind of situation that is hitting them, empowerment is the way to create agility in their organizations and actually to move ahead. Point number 4, 5, and 6 actually. I just want to share the fact that work from home, remote working, whatever you call it, has probably been the biggest and the fastest innovation to hit the workplace in recorded history, right? The number of people that have been impacted and how quickly this change came about. So there are differing realities that this whole remote working and work from home created, which is what we are really trying to kind of present here. Work from home has been a challenge for the old economy. There were issues, most definitely, biases. This was not a natural way of working, and there was a little bit of a climb up the ladder as far as the old economy was concerned. There is no question about the fact, coming to point 5, that remote working has certainly improved productivity, and everybody kind of raising the flag, raising their hand and saying, yes, travel has come down, productivity has gone up, we are back to almost pre-COVID levels in many, many cases in terms of the output and response to the market. So that's the great story, right? And but point number 6, work from home is not only about efficiency, it's also about culture. So what are the dangers lurking here? What is some of the conversation that is beginning to happen? How is the culture beginning to drift, and how is HR being expected to respond to this is actually the next point. 7, the most powerful tailwind was digitization. That doesn't need too much of an explanation. And it was not surprising that almost 92% of our respondents had actually accelerated their digitization programs. What's the kind of change management issues that is leaving behind is what the report talks about. The big reset is still work in progress. So like I said in the beginning, while we've done a great job as business of responding to the reaction phase, protect the health of people and restart operations, the more permanent reset of how we're going to run our organizations from here onwards, how is the structure going to evolve, how is the culture going to evolve, and what are some of the more permanent changes that we need to make arising from changes in consumer behavior, as well as changes in the internal environment. That's a little bit of a work in progress. But point number 9 over here, we still do see some case studies where businesses are beginning to think about that and put some pillars into the ground in terms of how they want to respond in a longer term. So point number 10 and 11, what's the leadership of tomorrow? With this research shows up, and finally, what is the role of HR? that is really emerging. Think design, right? So they are the points that we are quickly going to make. But here's the summary of what the research report actually kind of brings out. So strong value orientation of Indian business. And like I said, 92% of respondents believe employee engagement has remained the same or has improved. And one thing that was very heartening is employees responded with an unprecedented level of commitment and business alignment, right? So the kind of responses, I mean, two responses we've given here, Manu Wadhwa saying, don't worry your family, right? That's what I mean by the compassion and community outreach. You will see so many examples in the report. The one that I personally like the most, is a commercial vehicle industry with something like 30 or 40,000 drivers belonging to one company or the other, stuck all over the country. And how the commercial vehicle industry kind of organized itself to make sure they reach out to these people, get them to cross borders and actually come home. That's what I mean by compassion and what Mahalakshmi says here, how colleagues give back when you show care. It helped us to bounce back. So this is one part that you will read about in the report of how this compassion helped us in the first 3, 4, 5 months to actually turn the corner, to protect health as well as kickstart our businesses with startup operations, right? Sustainable people operations won over cost. 66% of our respondents reported loss in revenue and severe cash problems. Despite the fact the response that you saw coming from industry was quite different, refreshingly considerate and directed towards sustainability of operations and people centricity. This one example that actually comes out, which is a call out over here, an amazing example in the aviation sector, right? While they reduced permanent headcount, one of the few companies in our sample to actually do that, their net promoter score actually went up from 38 in January to 66 in July, which actually speaks about the manner in which they carried out this exercise, the sensitivity they showed, the care they showed, the communication that followed it, right? This was really an amazing learning for us who were kind of involved in the operations. Command and control lost ground significantly. Whatever action you are taking is the best, says Suresh Tripathi from Tata Steel, Rajiv Kapoor. You have to delegate and allow people to take decisions. The only thing I'll say here is, I'm not sure that empowered operations or distributed leadership emerged from the first principle. I think it emerged from a business need where people realize that if you have to build agility in your organizations, this is probably the only way to do it. What's happening in different parts of the world, what's happening even in different parts of the country, what's happening in different constituencies where the organization is operating, there's no time for the normal hierarchy and the tall organization to actually work. So organizations, by and large, this is not just coming from Suresh Tripathi in Tata Steel or Rajiv Kapoor, right? It's coming from virtually the entire leadership that we spent 50, 60, 70 hours kind of talking to, where they said that there's no other way of dealing with it. Will it sustain in the future as it return to some kind of a normalcy? Is this coming from first principle, or is it coming from a convenience that there is no other way of tackling this crisis except by empowering and delegating to people? Is still a thing for the future that we can kind of talk about. Work from home has been a challenge for the old economy. And I think it was said very well by Reena Wahi from Tata Realty. A work from home culture for a brick and mortar company like ours is a huge mindset change. Whereas on the other hand, Microsoft would say we had the technology and we had the culture, right? So this is really the contrasting picture of how different sectors of the economy approach work from home. And what Reena is saying is not true only of Tata Realty. Across the board, when you look at the manufacturing sector, this was a difficulty. They responded to it very quickly, but there was a mindset change required. There were biases. How can you allow people to work from home? How will we control performance? How will we manage these people? What will happen to frontline leadership? But we were able to find answers pretty quickly, and that's truly the learning curve that the old economy kind of went through, right? Remote working has certainly improved productivity. There's no question about it. Travel went down, commute went down. I like what Vinod Agarwal from Commercial Vehicles says, that, in fact, Vinod Agarwal says, I'm never going to go back to the old ways of working because my connect with the customer has gone up, my connect with the employees has gone up, right? And I'm able to suddenly realize I'm able to do many more things that I was not able to do, right? Udbhav, yourself, you have talked about how travel and productivity, how your connect with your own team has gone up. And Microsoft, Shipra Singh talks about one-on-one conversations went up during this period. So it was a period when efficiency and productivity actually improved, and in many cases, people are reaching, if not exceeding, pre-COVID levels in terms of outcome. But work from home is not only efficiency, it's also about culture. And that's the tough question. So firm after firm, when I ask this question, there are firm answers, but I think there's a reflection and danger of multiple cultures emerging and organizations beginning a little bit to lose control. What order is required, says Kevin, Siddiqui Saab, how do you create a high-tech and high-touch organization is the challenge. We are used to hunting impact, says Raj Raghavan. And if you see the data, mental well-being issues beginning to climb, limited work-life balance issues at 47% beginning to climb. Bear in mind, this is a month and a half, 2-month-old data. A lack of social connect beginning to climb. And these are things that are beginning to impact both employee engagement and the culture of the organization. The most powerful tailwind, digitization. I won't spend too much time on that. I think this is a very obvious one. The only thought I want to leave you behind with is difficulty in shaking legacy and ensuring synergy and integrated solutions, the work still to be done. The big reset is still work in progress, right? So I like what Sanjay Bail said, Sanjay Bail, the chairman of the National HR Committee. The organization has an immune system which produces antibodies and rejects ideas and actions which challenge existing business models, right? So how are we going to restructure our organization? What does the new leadership mean? Prince talking about using the power of visualization. So I think companies we found are in a place where they are understanding what has happened, absorbing the learning of what has actually happened, and beginning to formulate their plans about, in the longer term, how we're going to run our firms from a leadership, from a culture, and from a structure standpoint. The danger here a little bit, don't turn reimagining into a slogan. Everything has now become reimagining. It should be a serious and visionary process which selectively breaks with the past, relooks at the business model as well as design. Here are some case studies of the big reset that we kind of spoke about, a steel giant. You should read about this case study in the lots of innovative work happening in the way they have organized work pods. They have turned the thousands of employees into 3,000 groups, and how they are managing that. I think it's a learning. How they're trying to take their own permanent employees and turn them into gig workers in certain cases, rather than hiring gig workers from outside. Remarkable innovations happening in this firm, which will set a direction for the future. Automotive OEM. Once again, talking about we have to selectively delete our past and become globally competitive. Lots of innovations happening as far as turning leadership into simplicity, modesty, and listening, and bringing change in the mindset towards digitization. Higher acceptance of remote working, right? Diversified auto component player, looking at how to create version 2 of their whole company. Change in structure, change in leadership processes, change in delegation of powers, change in basic policies, change in work organization. A lot that is happening that they hope that by January, February next year, they'll be able to announce to the world that this is the name of the firm, version 2.0. You can read about that in the report. Global media player, very innovative in terms of the first experiments we have seen in how to take work from home. So they've taken their employees and turned them into 4 cohorts depending upon their interaction with work and their interaction with office, etc. And they are beginning to look at their HR policy and see how they can actually customize the HR policies around the needs of each cohort. a sports technology gaming company, 450 employees into smaller teams. Once again, some great experiments happening here. Global snacks company, which had already started, embedding a very different culture and growth mindset into the organization, also making some permanent changes in the structure based on how consumer buying experiences are beginning to change. The leadership of tomorrow is being created, right? So the big things that the study talks about: growth energy people with ambition who can vision the future and then take the step required to create it. Survival energy people who have agility and resilience. Human energy, humble but not weak, appreciate the human change. Digital energy, having the digital dexterity. Once again, I love what Sanjay Bail said. COVID-19 has pushed us so much that 5-6 years from now, we will marvel at people who were born at this time, thought differently, and shaped their. Find the role of HR. Think design. And I really encourage the participants of this workshop to actually download the report and read this. HR consumerism, we'll talk more about this during our discussion. Flexibility, diversity, and how is HR, rather than using HR policies as a sheet anchor, beginning to become flexible to different employee constituents. HR architecture, design thinking, how does the structure need to kind of respond to how the market is changing, the consumer is changing, and how the ways of work are changing. Striking the right balance between compassion and outcome, between feeling and data. I think that's good advice. And finally, and perhaps the most important, curate the culture, right? Curate the culture. The hybrid working, the new leadership, employee expectation, mental health. So this brings us to the end. So these are the 11 highlights, along with, like I said, the role of HR and the expectations from HR. Like I said, I encourage you to download the report and go through more details. This is just a preview. Thanks so much for the opportunity, and Udbhav, back to you. Mr. Siddiqui, I just thought if you have some comments and your own insights on what's happened here, would really, I think, enjoy that.
Thank you, Deepak. Deepak, is the audio clear?
Very clear.
Good evening, friends. It was really exciting to be part of this research project. During the last 8-9 months, I think the maximum pressure and exposure was on the HR leadership all across the corporate. And there was a lot of, kind of discussion, hottest kind of debate, full of assumptions and presumptions. And revolving around this new leadership credo, the workplace, what will be the kind of role of HR, what will be the kind of dramatic change we were looking at. Work from home, the digital potential, turbulence, maybe resizing, restructuring of the business strategy and framework was all being very hotly debated. Kind of cost pressures, uncertainty, turbulence continued to create more confusion, adding, fuel to the fire. And that's very deliberated in the CII National Committee on Leadership and HR, that why not we do a kind of a quick research and hear from the horse's mouth what exactly is actually happening in corporates. What are HR leaders actually going through, what they are thinking realistically, what is going to happen really. What will be the changing role of HR? And that's where we collaborated with the help of Deepak with Talentonic, led by Indrani, led by our very excellent team on this project. So there were Prince, Pankaj, Udbhav, Imrana, Shifra, and obviously Manu was playing a big role. And Indrani and her team really helped us big ways with me. Perhaps when we are looking at these 10, 11 very clear outcomes, we are looking to dwell further, think further, and then perhaps define or redesign for our respective corporates what will be the kind of impact which can help us strategize much more realistically over the next 4-5 years what HR is going to do. And I think with this kind of research, thanks Deepak, great work by your team, very exciting and very clear payoff for all of us. But I think my word of caution will be that one size fits all is not going to be the principle we are recommending based on this research. I think as Deepak said, you can download, maybe deliberate, think over, and develop perspective which can suit your respective business sector and your company. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be part of this very exciting session. Back to you, Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Siddiqui, and thank you, Deepak, to give us the insight on wonderful research work which was done by your team under the guidance of Siddiqui. And before, I think we are very much on time, Deepak, so before proceeding further, I would like to on some of the thoughts on moving forward. So I would start off with my first question to you, Deepak. Am I audible? Is it?
Yes.
Okay, Deepak. Just while you were doing this research and all, meeting the industry leaders and the CHROs. So my first question is: in the world where work from anywhere becomes a norm, how do we retain the social capital and sustain the social aspects of the workplace? You have very well defined it and mentioned in your report. I think, Deepak, you are on mute. Yeah, now you are audible.
Yeah, okay.
There's a bit of a connectivity issue there.
Yes. So Deepak is there. We'll give him a minute.
Yeah, I think Mr. Dhawan has a bandwidth issue at his end.
Yeah.
Hence his audio and video is not coming across.
I think, Udbhav, let me just take this question for the time being.
Yeah.
I think to a great extent, I think most corporates, when we are looking at this work from home perspective, the potential, undoubtedly we are all very clear that this is something, as Deepak said, in the old economy, industries, corporates, is a big finding and big realization. But at the same time, I think going forward, we'll have to look at a fine balance between work from home and work from the workplace perspective. Because somewhere when we talk of the social capital, that in any case has become a challenge even in the last 8-9 months. People have felt that kind of absence of being with colleagues, being with the teams, being with the maybe close connect with the senior leadership. So somewhere perhaps we are going to look at this hybrid model developing into a fine balance where there can be a kind of refresher visits, maybe weekly, monthly, depending on the kind of business sector, where people are back at the workplace while we realize the potential of work from home. That will add tremendous talent flexibility, convenience, and maybe empowerment. And to a great extent, we'll have to balance it with bringing in the kind of cultural touch, that kind of maybe social capital we have to respect to create opportunities for connecting with the main company itself, main culture itself. That kind of physicality and feeling will have to be balanced out. And somewhere perhaps therefore I have been using this very clearly that when we are talking otherwise also bringing in high tech, we should also look at creating this high touch. And somewhere one simple example which becomes very relevant to my mind, during this very typical lockdown crisis, perhaps we were also able to connect with the families of our employees. Although we were looking at this work from home as a basic reality, but that kind of high touch was also very, very effective in my thinking. So somewhere this hybrid model will have to be a delicate balance between the two.
Well said. And what you mentioned about the touch, in fact, that will be the key to the connectivity of with the people and the workforce. So Mr. Siddiqui, this is directed to you, and this is about leadership. So how do you see the leadership of tomorrow shaping up? And what does this mean for the leadership styles?
Udbhav, when we look at the leadership credo for the new world, really, in my thinking, it will revolve around a very good balance, mature balance between the three quotients of leadership: vision quotient, business quotient, and emotional quotient. Historically, we have got maximum leaders generally very strong in business quotient, but vision quotient have been relatively very low, and emotional quotient has been by default literally ignored or absent. So my thinking is, going forward, there has to be a good equation, a balance between the three quotients. When I look at this good equation, this balance, what will be the kind of 6 or 7 critical perspective part of the new DNA of leadership? In my thinking, simplicity, modesty, and walk the talk will become a very, very critical ingredient for leaders to be effective in creating that kind of leadership credibility and trust in this kind of turbulent kind of period, post-pandemic also. We are also looking at this capability to keep calm, have that resilience to decode the crisis and then lead, rather than being reactive to the whole situation or being aggressive about the whole thing. And somewhere, some mistake happening. Perhaps this is a big learning going forward. This is typically a learning from the Japanese school of thought. When we look at this kind of capability to keep calm, maybe from the cricketing is the kind of good example. Keeping calm will be one important perspective going forward. Compassionate leadership, we have all experienced during this pandemic, has worked wonders, created tremendous kind of employee loyalty, commitment, and a very strong desire to be with the company, aligned to the new turbulence and the kind of business order requirements. So therefore, compassionate leadership is going to stay, in my thinking. This big priority on employee health and safety, connecting with people, empathy is going to be part of this trait. Also, listening leadership, in my thinking, in Maruti worked very well. Instead of leaders all the time telling, setting directions, I think sometimes we must have this space for listening to our people, listening to our followers, and somewhere finding countermeasures, way forward, good suggestions coming from this kind of a crowdsourcing of ideas, where you listen to people. Listening leadership, appreciation is going to be part of an important ingredient, part of this listening leadership. Also, maybe one different perspective I'm talking of from the ethical perspective, guts and courage in communication, to be steadfast professionally, to be confident and honest in your intent will be one important ingredient going forward. Transformational leadership, there is no other option. If we need to stay in the race, we need to really combat well, then transformational leadership perspective will be an important DNA in my thinking. Last but not the least, I think ethics, ethical values, integrity, governance will pave the way for the best leadership credibility in these kinds of difficult times.
So thank you. And do you think that this will be sustainable even post-pandemic, in the post-pandemic world also, once we get into so-called normal, which is post this crisis of global pandemic?
When we are talking of the sustainability, I think to a great extent we are coming off a great adversity, an unprecedented crisis. And there is the real test of leadership character. Some of these traits will get added to make it a more formidable leadership, because I don't think after pandemic, the turbulence is going to get over. In my thinking, this turbulence will become part of life as a leadership challenge going forward next, maybe medium to long-term perspective. And therefore, this is what perhaps is my thinking going forward, what will be the kind of impact on the leadership DNA.
Well said, and thanks for this. So Deepak is back. So Deepak, I would like to ask you one straight question about
you want me to go back to the question answered?
Yeah. In fact, Mr. Siddiqui was kind enough to present you in that question, but nevertheless, I would like to put another question to you, which is very much in your report. So what will, according to you and according to research or interaction all the CEOs and the CHROs, what, according to your report and according to your thinking, will be the futuristic role of HR in the post-pandemic world? Deepak.
Yeah, okay. So, this is one place, Udbhav, where we are about to go beyond the Dave Ulrich model, which has guided us for the last decades. I'm not saying that model has become inadequate, but I think, what we witnessed for the last 2 or 3 decades, people, process, operations, and strategy, I think we are stepping slightly outside that model in terms of what the expectation from HR is at this point in time. We spoke about 4 things, right? We spoke about HR consumerism, which is a very powerful word. And what people have said is, HR consumerism actually is talking about that instead of holding on to HR policy, can we show a little flexibility, right? Not a little, considerable flexibility. In fact, some of the heads of HR business leaders are, in fact, if I'm trying to convert some of my own people into gig, or if there are things, Mr. Siddiqui in fact talked about that in Maruti, different employment opportunities and cohorts are going to get created, to go out with a single policy and say that this is how, if you are turning your employees into cohorts to say, these are the guys who are going to work from home, these are the people who have to come to work because it's important for them to kind of interact, and you're going to convert your employees into a different milieu. And I think it's important for HR to look at it from a flexibility standpoint and say, so I think Mahalakshmi was the one who said it very beautifully, if you can segment the market, why can't you segment your own employees in terms of what their special needs are? Instead of holding on to one policy, be able to customize that policy to the needs of the business and to different employee groups. I think this was a very powerful one thing that came out as an expectation from everybody, what to expect from HR. The second thing was really the HR architecture that I spoke about, design thinking, right? If you are incubating new ideas, if you are looking at a new visionary kind of an organization, if you want to change your business model, how are you going to design HR? How are you going to design the organization structure? How are you going to design its internal processes, right? How are you going to design the outcomes that you want the organization to actually deliver, right? So almost like design thinking, right? And how is that going to happen? Thirdly, we talked about striking the right balance, which I think everybody understands. The fourth part, which is probably the most critical expectation from HR, is curate the culture.
Wonderful.
And that's a tough one. That's a tough one. Margaret said in a book, Beyond Measure, culture is the secret sauce, but nobody's got the recipe. It's damn good that nobody's got the recipe, because if you had the recipe, there would be no secret sauce, right? We'd all be doing 1, 2, 3, 4, on your way, right? So this is a part that you are actually visualizing where you want to land the culture. And there is so many cultural nuances to what's currently happening. You pick up digitization, there are change management and legacy issues that we're talking about. You look at work from home and remote working. There are huge change management and cultural issues that are kind of embedded in that. You look at the new conversation on leadership that we are beginning to have. We want people with a growth mindset, not people with a static mindset. We want to selectively forget the past. So there are many mental health issues. I like what one of you said. Mental health issues are not going to be dealt with buying an app and now making it available to people that if you have a mental health issue, please log in and some counseling is available to you. There's a certain solution that you need to put in place that so far has not been called upon by us. So curating this culture is a big role which encompasses many, many initiatives, right? But basically it is saying, how are you going to, and I think the difficult situation here, frankly, this is what I was saying in the first question as well, because there is no secret sauce, we got to find our own solution. And unfortunately, in many organizations, we measure everything, but we don't measure the culture. right? So when there's a black swan event, we say, well, we did well because we have a certain culture, or we didn't so well because we had a certain culture, right? So I think curating this culture, being able to visualize where you want this organization to land 3, 4, 5 years from now is probably, and curating those conversations. There are a culture is like a very good looking painting. It consists of thousands and thousands of small strokes and some big brushes, right? So what are those small strokes? What's the conversation that is happening? What are you saying in your town hall? What are you saying to your people when you induct them? What are you saying? So those conversations are actually, and that culture has to be almost manufactured. But first, you have to be clear in terms of visualization, what exactly you want. So this is what, and this is why I say the Dave Ulrich model, we haven't bypassed it, but I think it will probably evolve to a very different level. And this is not, like Siddiqui Saab said earlier, this is not the end of this debate. This is probably the beginning of the debate about the role of HR. So we just added one bit to it, but I'm sure this conversation will continue not only in CI but elsewhere as well over the next coming months and years about how the role of HR is evolving. These 4 big pillars of the role of HR is what we were able to identify from our research and from the insightful conversations we had with the business leaders. I hope I've addressed your question, Utpal.
Yes, Deepak. Thanks a lot. And I think we have got around still 7 minutes to go. Am I right? We have got 7 minutes, and I've got some very interesting questions which have come from the audience. So before I get into it, I would request CI to get into the audience poll question also, so that we have last 3 areas to really discuss.
Sure.
So audience poll, please.
Yes, please. So the audience poll is now live. I will request the participants to go to slido.com and again key in the same event code 1020 to participate in the live poll. I will quickly flash the results on your screen also so that everyone can see it. Yeah. Is the screen visible? We've already started to get responses. I'll request all the participants to kindly visit slido.com and key in 1020 as the event code to participate in the live poll.
So interesting. So with the advent of whole impact of HR increased for the future, and we have got I think 95% participants saying that they strongly agree. And with this, Siddiqui Saab, I would like you to just comment on this. The answers are obvious, but your valuable comments will be really appreciated.
Yeah, I think, Udbhav, that will be the next HR challenge because the role will increase for sure. HR responsiveness will be the biggest expectation. I think the HR credibility and the reaching out to people in terms of this empathy, this compassionate leadership, which I talked about, will be a big challenge. We are looking at this, apart from high tech, we are looking at this high touch will be a big challenge. And it will not be that physicality alone. It will be in various kinds of forms in terms of engagement, in terms of mental health, in terms of maybe looking at the development initiative, capability building. Somewhere, perhaps, we'll have to be thinking big on this perspective with flexibility, maybe with empathy, and to a great extent with a compassionate and listening leadership perspective. So I fully endorse and agree with the view which is emerging out of the polls.
So it means responding immediately and timely to the employee needs, be it anything in terms of their mental, emotional well-being or any of the needs in the organization. So it covers everything, the response time of the HR to react to those needs of the employees.
That's right.
So Indrani, we have few minutes. We have a very interesting question which has come from the audience, and so I would like Mr. Siddiqui, Mr. Dhawan, our Prince is also there. Any of you can respond to this. How to adopt differentiated approach to work from home for functions where it is feasible and for large set of functions where it is not. If you can share your perspective in light of the industries like automobiles, pharmaceuticals, services, etc. So this is the question. I don't know.
Yeah, Udbhav, perhaps I read that question, and I think it's a very, very realistic kind of a question asked. And to a great extent, our experience has been that in terms of shop floor work, in terms of factory operations, obviously work from home doesn't fit in at all. But perhaps when we look at people who are working in terms of office space, managerial roles, support functions, central functions, there I think work from home scope is reasonably big. So to a great extent, we'll have to look at classifying, and I remember part of Genesis, I think Sony Pictures team made this kind of a presentation, that they created these kinds of 4 blocks in the company. And they use some words like roaming and other very interesting kind of branding exercise, I'll say, that there are people where I think 25% of them can work from home, but 75% of them will need to work from office or the workplace, and vice versa, 4 such blocks. That kind of clarity is where it is going to be really helping the business by adding more productivity and more high performance efforts. It cannot be blindly fit all, one size fit all kind of a situation that everybody we are assuming will work from home. And therefore, perhaps when we look at Maruti, I think many people in office functions, HR, finance, IT, marketing, supply chain, part of maybe engineering also, are working from home. But people who are related with plant operations, who are making cars or supporting making cars, obviously they'll be working from the workplace itself. But to a great extent, we are creating opportunities for those who are working from home that they can have a refresher and a touch with the main company at least once a month. So that the risk probability is still low, employee health and safety is still a top priority, but still we are doing good business in terms of responding to the market, whatever demand is there. That kind of differentiated approach is, I think, is the best way going forward.
Agreed.
Can I just step in and say just a couple of things? One is a very recent research that has come out. I think it came out just last week. And what it shows based on an analysis, one, of industries, and secondly, of roles, is that in a country like India, not more than 22% of the people, approximately 20 to 22% of the people, are in industries and doing roles which can actually be done from home, right? If you look at the large employment in manufacturing, if you look at the large employment in EPC, in projects, in construction, in retail, these are all industries where working from home will be, even if you take aviation, for example, out of the 25,000 people that this company that was part of our sample had, not more than 4,500 of them. You look at this EPC giant, which is part of our study once again, out of the 44,000 employees, they're only looking about 4,500. So by the very nature of work, this research is saying that not more than 20 or 22% of the people in an industry like India will be actually able to work. This is point number one. Point number two, which I want to quickly say, is that looking for equality in this kind of a situation where, rightly you said what Sony has done in terms of 4 cohorts and now looking at policy to match those cohorts. These are people who work from home, need a different policy infrastructure. These are people who have to come to office, need a different policy infrastructure. That kind of innovation is actually beginning to start. And precisely this point about HR consumerism is, let's not go with the old model of saying, how do we treat everybody equally, which is not to say you treat somebody unjustly, but appropriate to their working circumstance. I think this is the second. Third point I want to mention very quickly, Bob, on this question is, you should actually look at what Tata Steel is doing, thinking about some of this stuff. They are actually looking at something like the blast furnace pulpit, right? And saying, if I can replicate the blast furnace pulpit to operate from home, I can actually operate the blast furnace from anywhere. Why only from home, right? So this business of go to work, because after all, blast furnace is as brick and mortar as you can actually get, right? So this kind of thinking and this kind of innovation is what is actually beginning to happen, which is igniting this debate. That as you look at remote working, different people working in different kind of situations, how is HR kind of responding to this? And there's some interesting experiments which are happening. Thanks so much, Udbhav.
Thanks, Deepak. And I wish we had more time because I think we are getting questions, but I would just put a hard stop here, and I would take this opportunity to thank Deepak and his team for bringing out this wonderful report, which will be really a path finder for many of us in the industry. And for heading this research group, and last but not least, project and holding this HR conclave. Thanks a lot at the audience and all the participants of this session. Thanks a lot for attending this session. And
thank you very much, Mr. Ganju, for leading this particular extremely interesting session, full of such rich data. This report can be downloaded. We have shown on the screen. The report can be downloaded either from the CII HR Conclave site or the Talentonic site, or from that the code that which Mr. Dhawan had showed earlier. Or if there are some questions that you still want, which we were not able to answer, please write to us, and we will then send it to the panelists and Mr. Ganju for some answers. We can also have we have a round of just a roundtable kind of thing sometime later. For if you have questions, please do. We promise to do something where you can come get together again and get answers to your questions. So thanks a lot. This was a brilliantly informative session, very, very insightful, and thank you, Deepak, for doing this study with such a kind of incisive depth. Mr. Siddiqui for leading this whole thing, the thought of doing this study and actually taking it through many, many interactions. And Mr. Ganju, similarly, for both your interactions, the inputs that you've given, and your brilliant steering of the whole session today. So we will be ending day 2 of the conclave now, and we will request participants to please, come back at 9:15 sharp for a session which is going to be very interesting by Skillsoft on actually how it is accelerating opportunities for growth, innovation, and resilience. And it will talk about learnings for top themes that one needs to adopt to survive and thrive, as well as react, respond, reimagine, and rebuild for a future. So this is very good for people who are handling L&D and others. It's good for both organizations and individuals. It is a little early start tomorrow because we wanted to give as much content as possible to people through this conclave. So do come in by 9:15, log in, and be ready for the last scintillating day. Thank you. So with this, we kind of announce the end of this session and the second day of the conclave. Thank you very much, and have a very good night and good evening and good night.
Thank you. Thank you, Rani.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.